Today we're going to take the new Kawasaki Ridge out and make my life easier for next year while farming by making some GPS driven boundaries. So in the first video I made announcing my partnership with Kawasaki here in the new Ridge side-by-side, I mentioned that I was a little disappointed in the fact that they didn't have a whole lot of mounting options for GPS stuff. So I got in contact with the accessories expert at Kawasaki and he recommended me get this. It is a storage rack that can go on the back of the Ridge. Now they sent it out to me and explained to me how to use it, and it was very simple. It came, I got the whole thing assembled in like 10 minutes, and what's really cool is their new KQR system. So these are just like little quarter turn things. You take them all off, you put them on, so you can take the storage rack off in a matter of about 2 minutes. This allowed me to mount my GPS system right on top of the storage rack without having to drill any holes in the Ridge itself. And you know, I think the storage rack's kind of ugly, but for the fact that the second I'm done making boundaries, I can just take it off and store it in a corner somewhere, I'll take it. And then there is a way to get cables into the cab through a grommet in the front of the Ridge here, but being that my GPS receiver is in the back, I just ran the cable through the door right here, underneath the seat where I'm sitting, and then it just kind of hangs here. And then a commenter actually commented about mounting my monitor to this grab handle up here, and I thought that was a good idea, so I did it. And you know, it's a little flimsy, but it ain't bad. It's definitely usable. Overall, that's a lot better system than my $300 Honda Recon that I bought a few years back, especially on these really cold November days. We're gonna take a quick break to talk about today's video sponsor, BetterHelp. You know, farming isn't just about tending to our crops. It's also about taking care of ourselves too, because life can throw us some pretty tough challenges. And that is why I personally used BetterHelp last year when I found myself losing ambition and having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. So I want to give a shout out to our friends at BetterHelp because they get it. They know that whether it's dealing with uncertainties of the weather or the pressures of keeping a farm running smoothly, sometimes we all need a little bit of support. BetterHelp connects you with professional counselors right from the comfort of your own home or tractor cab. Now, I personally found out having someone to talk to can make a world of a difference, and BetterHelp made it simple. I was able to hop online, be matched with licensed therapists that listened to me and gave me helpful and unbiased advice. So whether you're feeling down in the dumps or just need someone to complain about, BetterHelp's got your back. Taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your crops. BetterHelp is offering a special discount to get you guys started. Just go to betterhelp.com/6gen or click the link below for 10% off your first month and see how they can help you navigate life's challenges. That is betterhelp.com/6gen or click the link down below in the video description. Don't be afraid to take that first step towards feeling better. Now you may be wondering to yourself, Carson, why are these boundaries so important? Why do you bother going out and drawing these boundaries in the field and you can just go drive it in the spring with a planter? No big deal. Well, my planter, you guys have not seen it yet, but little hint, it does not have any markers on it. Therefore, I have to use GPS, especially when I'm planting my boundaries and headlands and stuff like that, because if I don't, I have no point of reference to follow, and my rows are going to be crisscross applesauce every which direction. Now, I can just simply do a A-B curve where I record my line and then I come back and I follow it the next time. But if I make a boundary, I can actually just have my tractor follow the boundary in real time. So if I go out and I drive this boundary, when I get into my field, all I gotta do is hit the auto steer button and I'll have nice, perfect, straight boundaries around my field when planting. Now, is it as simple as just putting a GPS receiver on your rig and then going out and driving around the corners, around the edge? Sadly, no. There's quite a few measurements that need to be done, and there's a couple that a lot of people forget about. Lots of the times what people forget about is that when they make these boundaries, they gotta make it so their equipment doesn't hit stuff along the edge. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's what the boundary's for, right? But it gets a little complicated because wherever that boundary line is, let's say you have a 30-inch planter, so all your rows are spaced 30 inches apart. your last row will be 15 inches in from the end of that boundary. But let's say that you come by with the corn head and the corn head snout sticks out 2 feet past the last row, which in case of a 608C or a 612C does, well, now your snout is going to catch the fence post that you barely missed. So when I'm driving these boundaries, I have to account for the fact that the row may be right here, but my snout on my corn head can stick out 2 feet past where the end row is going to be. So I have created a genius system to prevent equipment from hitting things. So I got my Agri GPS CRG located right here. For those of you guys that don't know, this is a GPS receiver that's fully compatible with John Deere. And in fact, we just came out with a brand new one that has nationwide RTK with no subscriptions. It's super cool. Go to my website down below if you want to check that out. But if we go in here, so let's say we're going to make a boundary. So we go in, fields and boundaries, create boundaries, driven standard boundary. Now it's going to ask you this question. It's going to say, where do you want your offset point to be? So I want to go off the GPS, and then how far over do I want to make this boundary line? Now this is the most important step in making boundaries that everyone forgets about. Most people just set this to 0, and they just go out and they just make the boundary, don't think much of it. But if you're on 30-inch row spacing, your planter is gonna plant that last row 15 inches in. So here's the GPS unit. So your first row is gonna be about right here. But then you have to measure 2 feet out past that row for your corn head, or let's say, like the 1770 planter, for example, that we used this past year. The frame of that planter stuck out 2 foot past the last row unit. So now you have to measure 2 foot out. And that's what this little flag is doing here for. I measured 15 inches in, and then 24 inches out, which is 9 inches past the GPS receiver. So my system here is that as long as this flag don't hit it, theoretically, my corn head or the planter that I'm gonna use should not hit it either. So because my GPS is actually located on the edge, I am going to leave this boundary offset right here at 0. However, like my old Honda Recon, if the GPS was mounted in the center of the unit, you would have to measure from the center to the outside edge or to the outside of your tire. Then if you had 30-inch row spacing, you'd have to measure 15 inches in, and then you'd have to measure out what your furthest piece of equipment is that could possibly hit something, such as a planter or a corn head. And then you have to measure out the 24, and then you'd have to figure out what that distance is and enter it in the monitor right there. But okay, hopefully that makes sense to you guys. It's one of the most overlooked things when making boundaries, and then people wonder why their planter took out a telephone pole when they started planting. Well, that's because they didn't get the measurements quite right. So I just got to the field. This is the new field that I bought this year, so we have never actually, other than the ripping that I did, never been on this field. So I have no boundaries at all for it right now. Now when I purchased a field, they did a survey. So this pink flag right here is the edge of my field. So what I'm planning on doing is I'm gonna start by this field drive. I'm gonna make a point, come this way, line up my GPS receiver with this flag, and then make a point, pause it, and go to that end and make a point. So I have a nice straight line right here. I'll get in and demonstrate it to you guys here. So before I click that start recording button, I want to get myself into position. Now I do have a fence dang near or a barbed wire fence dang near all the way around this field. Now you guys did provide a bunch of great comments on what I can do to get rid of this fence, but it's not a priority at the moment. It'll probably be a future one, so I'm gonna account for the fence right now. It's actually gonna be a lot easier if I roll my window down and see where the heck I'm going. Okay, if I just get this lined up, it looks like the barbed wire fence isn't really here. I would say right there is pretty good. I like that. So I can hit the start recording button, and then it'll actually show me on the map. So I can drive forward now. All the way until my GPS receiver is dang near even with that little flag. I would say I basically nailed that. Yeah, perfect. Okay, and now I paused my boundary. So there's two ways you can either make a boundary. Either you can drive it and it'll record the whole thing while you drive, or you can make points. So if I pause the boundary and then I drive to a different area of the field and hit resume, it'll make a straight line between those 2 points. So I paused it right here. Now I can drive all the way to the other end and hit resume, and it'll make a straight point between, or straight line between these 2 points, making my boundary absolutely perfectly straight. Looks like I found a rock I gotta pick up. And it's cold out now, I'll do it next spring. Okay, now I don't even know where this little pink flag is here. There it is, right there. It looks like my neighbors knocked everything down, but you can see the post is right here. There's some pink here. And I'm guessing this little yellow thing, this is witness something something. I'm guessing that's it. So if I get up here, I actually need to back up about a foot. There we go. I would say that is pretty good. I can maybe back up a couple inches. But another nice thing about making boundaries is that it keeps you and your neighbor honest. It keeps you guys from encroaching on each other's land, because I'm gonna be able to use this when I get out and do tillage too. So in the spring when I come do tillage, I'll just follow this guidance line and it'll be in the exact same spot every year. That way I'm not going a foot or two on the neighbors and they're not going a foot or two on my side. So now, I don't know how well you can see it, there's this little purple line that's from way over there. Shows me right here, if I hit resume, bam, now it made a perfectly straight line between these 2 points. And now these headlands I'm about to drive down, I'm not worried about them being perfectly straight, but I want to be able to maintain my distance away from the barbed wire fence. So I'm just gonna hit resume and drive. And now I'm not going to drive a perfectly straight line, but that's okay, because once I upload all this to the John Deere Operations Center, I can actually delete points and make the line a little bit straighter if I'm unhappy with it. And here's why I want to get rid of my barbed wire fence so bad. I swear I just saw some. Did I not just run? Yep, right here. This barbed wire fence starts to fall apart, and then it goes into the field, and then you run over it, and then you got flat tires. Ah, that's why I hate these barbed wire fences. So another time that I use the resume and pause feature is when I'm going along tree lines. Because you can see right here, there's some nice big tree branches sticking out that I really don't want to scratch up this nice new Kawasaki Ridge with. So I pause the boundary. I can now drive around these trees. That way I don't hit them. Get lined up. I can hit resume. I can drive a few more feet. Hit pause. Drive around the trees, and so on and so forth. I should really actually just come and I believe, I mean technically they're not my trees, and I should talk with the owners, but I believe if the tree branches are hanging above your property, you're allowed to trim them off, because I really hate hitting stuff with the equipment. Hitting tree branches and scratching it up just gives me an icky feeling. Okay, so I've gone all the way around the field now, so all I have to do is hit save, and now I have a driven boundary around my field. So now let's say it's springtime. I'm out here with my tractor and my field cultivator. I can hit set track, new track, boundary fill. I can call it boundary track, bound dart track, good enough. And then it will give me a guidance line. I'm in neutral. It'll give me a guidance line all the way around my boundaries. That way I know that I am getting as close to my field edge as I possibly can without hitting stuff and having nice straight lines. So a couple days have gone past and I am in John Deere Operations Center. Now this is the boundary. I uploaded it from my monitor. And if I click on the edge like this, it'll show me all the points on this boundary. Now I have already gone in, I have cleaned this up. Now when I clean up boundaries, I typically try not to move any points because you could accidentally be moving a point across the boundary. So in this case, into the fence line, and then I could accidentally run a piece of equipment into the fence line. So I try not to move them here. I just simply delete points. So as I was going along, let's say this north fence line, I might have been weaving in and out a little bit, mostly because I was on frozen, ripped ground and the side-by-side was bouncing around a little bit. So I just found all the ones that made a pretty straight line. I deleted all the rest of them. So this is a nice straight line now. This is a nice straight line. This is obviously a perfectly straight line because there's only 2 points, and around and so on. Now what's really cool is I can make guidance lines based off this boundary now. So I made a guidance line that will perfectly follow each boundary or each edge around my boundary. And what's also really cool about John Deere Operations Center, and this is actually a fairly new update, I have yet to play with this, this is my first time, is you can make what's called an auto path boundary. So if I click on this right here, you give it parameters. So you say I want 120 foot of headlands and my implement spacing is 30 foot. You can now create every single guidance line in this field. It'll even create your headland guidance lines for you. So this is pretty neat. I'll probably end up using this. I won't follow it exactly like this. I don't really like the way they did some of these headlands. Like this right here, where this headland kind of almost matches up with this one, but doesn't exactly. I would rather follow this headland, disengage auto track right here, and then engage this line and keep going. And that way when I'm spraying, I have a nice line to follow around the edge instead of whatever this jumbled mess will be right here. But other than a few little things like that and this right here, I don't like this. But other than that, I mean, this is a pretty solid system for making basically, or pre-planting your field before you even get out in the field itself. So pretty cool to see this. And this is all what is accomplishable if you make good boundaries for your fields. If you don't have a good boundary for your field, this absolutely worthless.